It's a good concentrated movement. It forces the biceps to be isolated and work on their own. The problem is it puts your bicep in a very compromised position, meaning that you can tear a bicep pretty easily. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
Coconut water. I know this is something that you're particular about in terms of hydration. After I lift, I get into the habit of drinking 535 ml of coconut water. Is this good to do when on diet?
As you know, now that I'm a Floridian for the last 9 years or so, I have coconut trees in my backyard, so I can tap my own coconut if I want. But the truth is that, yeah, coconut water is good in terms of electrolyte replacement. It has a little bit of carbs, a little bit of sugar in it, but it's got like potassium and it's got sodium in it. And it actually, if you look at the electrolyte balance of coconut water versus the serum of your blood, it's almost exactly the same. So, which is good because it makes it easier to absorb, when you're drinking it. Problem is when you're dieting, I personally wouldn't want to be putting that extra sugar into my body, post work at any point during the day. It's kind of like wasted calories. Off season, I have no problem with coconut water. To be honest with you, coconut water on a really, warm day where you're really dying of thirst tastes delicious. But I find that when I add coconut water to a lot of things, it kind of changes the taste a lot. So I don't really use a lot of it during my day. Like I said, if I was really thirsty and I was at on the beach or something like that, and they were selling coconut water, I'd probably get one because it's good for fluid replacement. And it's not a bad idea. You can mix it with, some like amino acids if you want to drink it in the gym off season, which I think is fine. But if you remember those Prime Energy drinks that what's his name, the Logan Paul puts out.
Yeah.
Those
what all the kids want.
I think that ruins the taste. They have coconut water in those, and I just can't get behind it because it's like fruity taste combined with the coconut. It just doesn't mesh right. Like to me, like vanilla or chocolate with coconut tastes good, but not like fruity flavors. So I'm not really a huge coconut fan, but I wouldn't use it pre-contest only because of the sugar content.
Another question that's up your alley, and that is back training, specifically Dorian style versus Arnold style. You mentioned bent over rows as one of the exercises for widening the lower lats. What do you recommend on form? Dorian Yates style, where you're bent over slightly, or more like Arnold's, where you're way bent over? How about grip width?
Yeah, I like Dorian's philosophy on grip width. His philosophy is if you go too wide, even on pull downs, you're not really widening your back. You're actually making yourself weaker because when you come away from your body, you're not as strong. When you're closer to your body, you pull better. So I think that on pulls, even on reverse, you can go reverse grip, you can go overhand. I happen to go overhand because I'm always afraid I'm going to tear a bicep when I do the rows. I like about shoulder width is usually about as good, or a little wider than shoulder width. I don't like to get too wide on it because I think like I said, like Dorian says, you get weaker. So if you want to lift maximum weights to get the best results, I think that's important. Where I kind of differ on Dorian is I don't really like, he almost was in like a stand-up position when he did it. Arnold was bent over. I like Arnold's positioning better a little bit, maybe not quite as extreme. It seems like it's always like somewhere in the middle, the right answer. Because if you lean over too much, sometimes it puts you back in a compromised position. Obviously, you'd want to wear a belt on bent over rows. But if you stand up too much, it's like you can use your traps really easily. Now Dorian had really good form on his rows, so for him, he felt it exclusively in his back, but he had a huge back. If you're trying to just build a back, a lot of times when you're standing upright too much, you use your traps. You just shrug up with your traps, and you're not even getting your back involved. So I think if you lean over more, it forces you to use your lats. Some people have trouble, with that flexibility issue. And of course, you don't want to round your back. You want to keep your back in a slightly arched position so you don't, put your lower back in a compromised position. But really, somewhere in between Dorian and where Arnold stood is probably the right place to do it. Like I said, I try to lean over as much as possible, without compromising rounding my back. And I always pull low. So if you pull too high, you're going to use your traps. You want to keep your traps down, because if your traps are up, then you're using those to pull the weight. If the traps are down, the traps can't help you really very much, except the lower traps, which is fine. You want to work those anyway. You really want to try to focus on pulling into your lower stomach, which is going to force the lower lats to really contract more, which is going to add that mass and width. I think the bent over row is probably the purest back movement that you can do. We always say I always say incline barbell press is the best chest developer, because it works, the upper and mid pecs, which is what we want. For legs, squatting, free weight squatting is the bread and butter, and deadlifting, it kind of works with legs and back to a certain degree for lower back thickness and then trap thickness. So, you have to include bent over rows as one of the basic free weight moves that you just have to incorporate if you want to get big. And a lot of people don't like it because it's hard. Because to hold your position, you hold your body in that position. Also, you should always use straps or grippers when you're doing it, so you don't have your forearms as being the weak link. But it's a difficult exercise. It gets you out of breath because you have to hold and stabilize the weight. But that's why it's so good, because not only are you pulling the weight, you're stabilizing the weight as well with your whole body. So it's really a total body mass builder. And if you can get strong and you can use full range of motion on those, you have to have a big back. It's impossible not to, because you can't cheat. Whereas, unless you're using your traps, of course. Whereas when you're on a machine, the machine is doing almost 80% of the job for you, because it's stabilizing the weight. All you're doing is pulling. So yeah, you're getting a nice concentrated contraction in your lats, but the lats are not stabilizing. It's like I said, it's like doing hammer strength for chest versus free weights for chest, or it's like doing Smith machine squats versus free weight squat. You're just going to get more from the free weight exercises because you have to balance that weight, and that's very important.
How to avoid bicep tears on preacher curls? Should they be avoided, or are people doing it wrong?
It's an interesting question, and I always felt that when I would do a preacher curl, whether it be just a regular preacher free weight, movement, when your arm is in that, where there's like a bench underneath it, and your arm is like in this position, and it prevents you from cheating, really, essentially. I always do one arm at a time. I don't like to do two arms at a time, because I always feel like one arm is getting more work. It's a good concentrated movement. It forces the biceps to be isolated and work on their own. The problem is it puts your bicep in a very compromised position, meaning that you can tear a bicep pretty easily there. I see people use way too much weight. I see them jerk the weights up and use momentum. You're just looking to tear a bicep doing that. That movement is not a heavy movement. You shouldn't be lifting a lot of weight. It's a concentrated movement where you're really trying to just focus on flexing that bicep, isolating it. It's not going to be that strong compared to what you would do with a barbell or dumbbell or cable curl. It's an isolated finishing movement. And if you understand that in your head, you can safely do it, because you're not going to try to put too much weight on there. If you try to put too much weight and you use a ballistic type movement where you're jerking, you're going to tear, okay? Because there's no way for the muscle to kind of move. There's no way for your arms to kind of readjust. So if you put too much pressure on it in that position, it will pop, and I've seen guys pop biceps on that machine. So once again, it's not that it's a dangerous movement. It's a dangerous movement if you put too much weight on it. And I think that that's what you have to keep in mind when you do it.